much for joining. And as Candace said, this is really a topic that is a worry, is hot, is something that we need to deal with. But just by way of a brief introduction, my name's Bruce. I'm an employment lawyer, labor lawyer. I've been doing this for a very long time, for almost 26 years. And as a result of doing employment law and also having a commercial practice, I've seen over the last couple of years business tested to the extreme in some respects, with obviously with COVID in South Africa, obviously with the floods, and the political concerns that we've had, and now with Eskom becoming really a problem. I've seen business in many respects fall. I've seen business strengthen, and I've seen business become very agile. That's not limited to South Africa. I was reading a very interesting article on employment conditions in the Ukraine at the moment during the war. And notwithstanding what's going on in some sectors, business is carrying on. They've obviously got a huge shortage of electricity, but continues. So I think that just speaks to the human spirit. I remember years ago speaking to an engineer and talking about how often what used to worry builders, especially building huge freeways, bridges, is not an earthquake necessarily, not something massive, but something very little innocuous. So in very cold areas up in Gauteng, where water, if you had a crack, water seeps into a crack and freezes, and that little bit of water when it freezes becomes very powerful and breaks the structure or cracks the structure. Or in KZN, because it's so warm and seeds seem to grow everywhere, tiny little weed manages to find a small crack and work its way up, and the power of its stem and roots manage to break that structure. And in a way, that's sort of what I've been seeing during COVID and during Eskom with our business in South Africa is obviously an indomitable spirit that doesn't give up. Saying that there is a limit to what a business can accept and work with, and I'm hoping to share a couple of insights today. Thank you, Candace. We can move to the next slide. Now, just by way of a recap, I don't need to spend too much time as to what the problem is. But I do recall reading, apparently in the early 90s, when there was a change in government, one of the items that stood out is the old government said to the incoming government, look, remember where you need to, and they gave a list, and it was a bunch of power stations that had to be built, a bunch of dams that needed to be built, roads that needed to be maintained, a rail sector. And that seems to be the start of it. For whatever reason, that wasn't kept up. Now, just before we worry about doom and gloom and where this is all going, South Africa is not unique in where it finds itself in the world. I mean, there's having a stable grid is something which we take for granted, but in many countries, over 100 other countries, that's not a situation. And for me, that's not to excuse it, but it's to see, well, what do those countries do? Now, if we look to Africa, what I find fascinating is Morocco and Tunisia and Egypt are a couple of countries that are worth looking at. And what they've done is those three countries are 100% electrified, and their grids are stable, and they obviously be able to live and maintain an economy. Now, what's been done there is early on they realized that they wouldn't be able to keep up at the time and cost with coal and non-renewables. Egypt focused on hydropower. Obviously, it's got the Nile system. Morocco on significant solar and wind, and Tunisia a bit of both. Now, Morocco's got desert, it's got sun, and it's developed its system so large in such a manner, and it's so large that there's a plan in 3 years' time to start exporting that energy to Europe. Now, what on the other side of the coin, we've obviously got South Africa with load shedding. We've got Botswana, who's in a very similar situation to South Africa. And then in between, we have a range of countries. Zimbabwe and Zambia have up to 18 hours a day with no energy or no electricity. And Nigeria is a very unstable grid. They've had 206 complete failures, which means the grid goes down since 2010. A country like Pakistan have 265 days with interruptions. All right, so what do we make of all of that? Is that we need a system. We need a base load, which is basically we need enough power to keep what's called a sine wave, basically to keep the framework of the system up. I think it's a 50 hertz system, and that's the starting point. Now, I think we can all accept that that government is going to take time, and there's no solutions around the corner. So what is likely to happen? Looking at lessons of other countries. Once again, our Eskom, it takes too long to build a power station, takes too long to roll out reliable renewable systems. And I think we're going to end up with a parallel system in which business and then individuals, possibly and hopefully subject to government grants, can buy systems which tide over. So whether it's a battery system and which works with an inverter or some form of renewable system. Bearing in mind, I've got clients who were concerned about the stability of the grid 10 years ago and have slowly invested in their factories and warehouses to such an extent that they're now off the grid. It's been a big investment, but they've done it slowly, and they're now in a position to carry on and not worry about Eskom. So in that context, and bearing in mind, when you go outside and you stand in the sun, the sun provides every human on Earth at any one time 35,000 times the amount of energy that you need. So it's there for the taking, and it's just got to get to that. We've just got to get to that position. Now, in all of that, we've obviously got to keep lights on. And we've got to keep business going. And what does that mean from an employment point of view? Thank you, Candice. So if we to look at systems as they presently stand, with or without assistance from government, and there's some very interesting schemes that around this one on the screen here is obviously one of the largest wind turbines in the world out at sea. Thank you, Candice. Next one, there are systems using tidal flows. This is the Moroccan, one of the Moroccan farms that I've spoken to you about, that are out there doing all these amazing things. Now, where we have a workforce, and we now wish to deal with the unpredictable nature of Eskom power, and fitting in the needs and problems of our customers, we need to have a far bigger holistic view of where we're going. So in some of the industries that I've been involved in, we've pulled together these forums where manufacturers, suppliers, customers have got together just to try and understand who's going to do what and how they're going to target the way forward. So something I saw a little bit emerging out of COVID, where everyone realized we're all in the same problem. How do we deal with it? So from a macro point of view, from a commercial point of view, that is an important starting point, because if you just struggle on by yourself, thinking that you're the only one who's battling with this, the task gets a lot harder. Now, I appreciate in terms of competition law, you can't collude, you can't compete in an anti-competitive manner. I'm not proposing that, but what I am proposing is that, and we're going to talk about the employment law changes now, but from a commercial point of view, do you need to change what you're doing to ensure that you can still meet your customers' need? Have you spoken to suppliers? And if you haven't, then my suggestion is that you do so. Thank you, Candice. Now, the reason that I say so is on the basis that we all have commercial agreements around us. So whether they're in writing, whether they are oral, whether they're partly written, partly oral, that's how we deal with our suppliers. That's how we deal with landlords. That's how we deal with customers. And if you're entering into new leases from a commercial point of view, if you supply agreements, whatever you're doing, just bear in mind that we've got instability and we'll have it for some time, and that needs to be factored into whatever operation that you have. Now, a landlord will not necessarily give you a break. That you pay less rent because you can't get power. But I have seen lower rates from landlords. I've seen landlords looking to accommodate where possible. For example, working with the tenant to create some form of battery, some form of electricity supply. I've also seen in instances water filtration systems where landlords now realize to keep tenants they need to box clever. And I keep throwing up pictures, and this is one of a floating system that's available that can be moved around to quieter or busy places, just to demonstrate that there are many ways of getting to where we need to do. So I've got customers and clients who have byproducts that they can convert. I've got a client who's got in an agro business. They've got a byproduct that they can put into a digester, create methane gas, and then they've got a generator which used to run on diesels, being converted to run on what they call dirty methane, and takes this methane gas and they run a generator, which then obviously gives them electricity. Thank you, Candice. So the first step is in terms of terms and conditions, and I'm talking holistically. Everything that you do, sit down and look at the business and say, right, in terms of the terms and conditions that bind me, I'm stuck with them at the moment, but how do I change them? What can I do? And that forum is good. If you belong to an association, is press the association as to what they're doing. In the past, I would say lobby government, but at the moment, government's really not listening or not able to act to concerns. And then we get to employees. So if you're in a position, and this I learned many years ago, many employees believe employers have a safe full of money, of cash, and that is inexhaustible. Now, years ago, I learned to share as much information as possible, including salary bands of managers, execs, profitability, to explain cash flow, and to get the employees buy-in, for no other reason than to understand that we're all pulling in the same direction. Now, it's the same now. It's the same we had during the COVID lockdowns. That's exactly what we've had now. I'm a big proponent of embracing relationships. So if it's with a trade union, or if there's not a trade union, to have a workplace forum and to talk to everyone, to say, look, we're in trouble here. Where do we go? And everyone is fully aware of it, because you can see what inflation's doing. You can see your buying power is eroding, and you can see that there are less customers, or customers are stressed. But it's to be able to move and roll with that. Now let's focus on employment issues specifically. So what we have is, in terms of our law, your terms and conditions, you employ someone and you're stuck with those terms and conditions. Very difficult to vary them. And if you want to vary them, it has to be done by agreement. because without an agreement, it's unlawful, and no one and you can't enforce it. So one thing is with new employees, I look to bring on a clause in a contract and do it in a very open manner. Is that we're going to bring on this a clause in the contract where we can have short time, for example, and simply if we look to work in an unexpected shuts or load shed by Eskom, for example, or to look at conditions and shift patterns that try and match what Eskom is telling us will be load shed patterns, or to look at mechanisms of now whatever your adjusted way of working is. So as I say, you're going to talk to your customers. You're going to, and that discussion may simply be what you're doing now. Can you do it? How can you do it to help and make things better with the set of cards that we've been dealt? That may be in some instances where you go into another form of business, or open up another division, or do something else, because what you're doing just isn't sustainable. I mean, I've had clients who've shut down parts of operations in heavy industry where the energy draw is just too much, and it's just not going to happen. And as a result, they're cutting their losses and they're moving into something else. So from an employment point of view, the discussion is really important. So it's easy when you employ someone to bring them in on that condition, and which is summarized as flexibility, is to build in the flexibility that you need. And now, just like COVID, employees listen. Employees are helpful because they don't want a situation which is ultimately, if you can't change those terms and conditions, if you can't ensure flexibility, or if the power problems are such that you have to reduce your workforce, then you're going to end up in a retrenchment process. And retrenchments are going on at the moment and have been for some time, driven by many things, including the inflation, including the unpredictability of our power grid. Now, just bear in mind all rights. So your terms and conditions, employment terms and conditions, you've got a right to, as an employer, for employee to tender services, do their work properly. And as an employee, they have an expectation and a right, if they tender their services, to be paid. Now, all those rights come from somewhere, and the main sources are law, statutes, the law books, or from contracts. And that's why I'm saying your contract is your starting point. So if you're in a bigger industry, you might have an industry-wide or a regional set of terms and conditions which have been agreed, or imposed by the governments, for example, in the retail sector, or a very small region. Durban, for example, has an agreement, which is an agreement, collective agreement with unions and employers to have terms and conditions. Whatever the source of your terms and conditions, what you're looking to do is get flexibility, which comes from talking, agreeing, and whether it's a national, regional level, that's the first point to be considered. Now saying that, the one issue that I always note and point out is, it's all very well to do this, but we mustn't forget the basics, and that is that what we want is now more than ever a productive workforce. So the time that you're working, or your staff are working, you want the highest level of productivity. Now, I've been following, I'm not an HR practitioner, I'm a lawyer, but I like reading to understand what, for example, COVID has ushered in. And one thing I've noted is those employers that have experimented with 4-day weeks, those employers who've looked at the cost savings, time savings for those staff who can from working from home with the right employee who's able to do so, are that there is a lot within the day that employees can do to become more productive. So in South Africa, we're part of a network of countries that are running a 4-day week experiment. And what's been revealed so far is that there's very little production drop-off when you run 4 days a week, because everyone works harder and they're more productive. So I just go back to basics and go back to whether it's your HR team or your HR advisors to say, right, are we recruiting the right people? Are we training correctly? Are we managing? And for me, that's the big question mark. Managing is extremely difficult. It takes time, and it actually takes skill to manage employees, to keep them happy, or the technical term is to keep them engaged, to keep them not looking for other work, to keep them not wanting to leave, and if they're there to be engaged, which means they're focused. And there's various surveys that you can run, but in essence, if you've got staff who are engaged, and that usually comes with they're well managed and happy in what they do, they're productive and the business becomes profitable. And there's some brilliant surveys of big international retailers, Walmart, where they had staff who were not engaged, and that was due to what was being paid. The staff were bored, staff were felt not treated well, because everyone knew in America, if you couldn't get a job, go to Walmart. So there was no pride and so what they did is they lifted everything. They lifted the salaries, and then they got their management to such a level that employees became engaged. Now, for me, engagement is usually about communication. You've got to have managers who've got a high EQ, the ability to communicate, the ability to get the message across, to listen, and that's the start. So productivity, I see lots of, as a labor lawyer, lots of misconduct dismissals at the CCMA, Labor Court, etc. So-and-so does something wrong, they get fired. If they that's the biggest. The next biggest is obviously at the moment retrenchment type issues. The smallest is performance issues, and performance often is masked as negligence or some form of misconduct. But the reason there's few performance issues is because management and supervision is not at the level. And I'll give you an example. If you go to a restaurant and you order something. If you've got a good waiter or waitress who comes back and forward, you're great. But if not, you notice, and it's a very simple example, there's no supervision saying to the waiter, go back, offer something more, bearing in mind that the waitron is at the end of the day, the bigger the bill, the more the restaurant gets, the possibility of a bigger tip. So that for me is the focus. So if you've sat back, and just to quickly recap on a bit of a toolkit, you've sat back at the business that I'm running. Is it the right business? Should we be doing something else? Should we be doing it differently? Or number one. Number two, have we spoken to our stakeholders, our customers? What can we do differently? How can we do it in light of what Eskom is doing to us? We got that right. Three, do I have the correct workforce? Is it too big? Is it too small to have the right skills mix? And then five, right, managers, supervisors, we really need to get production going. We just need service levels up. And the time that's spent at work with the lights on, let's really see it happening. So, and I must emphasize that starts at recruitment, and shouldn't end with a dismissal. It should end with one day someone retiring, because they're productive and they've done particularly well. So from an employment point of view, I'm just re-emphasizing the basics. Now, on the hard issues, the questions that I have is, if my staff at work and the electricity goes off unexpectedly, do I have to pay them? And the answer is, unless you've got something contrary in your contract, yes, you do have to pay them. And bear in mind that your employee has spent a lot of effort and time getting to work, often using public transport, 2 or 3 different forms of public transport at great cost. So if we take a leaf from the construction industry has as a type of provision that if it's a type of work that's been done that can't be done in the rain, for example, because it's dangerous or unpleasant or whatever it may be, then if you come to work and it's raining for more than X amount of, I think it's an hour or two, I can't remember exactly what it is, then you will be paid X% of your rate for that particular day, and that's something that's been in place for many years and works particularly well. If you try and have a vanilla contract and try and now deal with what's going on with Eskom, you're going to battle. It's just because the law is such that employee tenders and services, you're obliged to accept those services and pay whether or not there's work. However, if you've got flexibility and that flexibility has got fairness built in, then you're good to go. And it's also shouldn't be a surprise. Everyone should know, goodness, the lights have gone off, the electricity's off, and this is what's going to happen to me. I'm going to now today get a third or 2/3 or half of my normal pay, and there's no surprise. Bearing in mind we are in I think almost the top of an inflationary environment. Life is extremely hard, and certainly we're facing record unemployment. We've got young people coming out of school who can't find employment. So it's really an important discussion, because at the moment employers are the backbone of the country. Employers keep, the statistic a couple of years ago was 6 employees are supported, 6 dependents are supported by an average employee in South Africa. With the retrenchments and with what's gone on, I'm sure that must be significantly more than it is. Now, just to share a couple of I don't know, anecdotes and stories, where this has worked successfully is I've had clients who've done a couple of things. They've sat down and they've re-engineered the way they do business. They've got some flexibility in their terms and conditions, both commercially and employment-wise. And when times are tough, they've marketed, advertised, done whatever they need to. They've looked to bring in renewables, to bring in alternate power solutions, and are slowly making their way through the muddle of where we find ourselves. I can tell you, I have seen a number of businesses asking for advice to open branches into Africa. So at the moment, Uganda has a GDP figure. I think it's 8.5%. Uganda's moving quickly. Kenya's moving quickly. Kenya, for example, has a very good power grid, which is largely of renewables. But bear in mind, it doesn't have the size economy or necessarily the population of South Africa. So I've seen clients go into Africa more than I've ever seen before. Eastern Europe, I've seen some of our bigger clients investing into Europe, and specifically Eastern Europe, a range of businesses there. And then those are often for smaller business, just not particularly obtainable. But saying that, I have seen the rise of online, for those companies that can do it, online services and online businesses, where and that can be from whether it's teaching or import, export, but sitting down behind a computer and saying, gee, I can speak to anyone in the world. And that's been something that I find quite amazing, that South Africans are able to do so. Now, just as I start to draw this to a close and field questions, where we are now is a time, as I've said before, where we need to go harder, quicker, and exert more energy to save the situation. Now, what lies around the corner? Who knows? Certainly, from a power point of view, it has to be the renewables. Talking to one of our clients who does this, Western Cape, very good potential for wind energy. the rest of the country, a lot of the northeast parts of Northern Cape, northeast, Eastern Cape, Karoo area, big areas of deserts, obviously big potential for solar. So that seems to be the future. But talking to everyone and listening to, I think there was Andre de Ruyter was talking. He was saying we'd have to spend 1.2 trillion to ensure a sufficient generation by 2030, and that's just not going to happen. So it's just the now is in your own solutions, in working together. I've seen some interesting small business parks who've got with a landlord and pooled money together, pooled resources for so small office park. The one I saw was 18 units. Of those 18 units, each one had someone answering the phone and doing admin tasks. And that task, they got together, spoke, and they pooled some of those resources. So they didn't need 18 different phones answered. There was solutions. So really, if I was to summarize what I'm saying today is, whatever you need to do for the biggest time in our history, we need to be able to talk and reach agreements on flexibility. Thank you very much, Candice. I'm happy to, if there are questions, I'm happy to field those. I'm not sure if there are, but you're very welcome to ask them or to email me. Candice will make my email address available, even phone me. Not the type of lawyer who just charges for everything. We tend to offer a service where if you've got a particular question, we can answer it, put you in the right direction, and if you want us to do something specific, we'll quote and advise. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else got any queries or questions? As I say, you're very welcome to. I think my email's on the link. If not, you can get it from Candice. But a lot of what I'm doing at the moment is, before we get to the law, it's just practical suggestions on how to do things, because I see where they go wrong, and when they end up in court or end up in unhappiness or strikes or retrenchments, and try and work back to see if we can stop those before they get sticky.
Okay, so thank you so much, Bruce. I don't think we have any further questions. Like Bruce says, if you need his contact details, you can always email myself, Candice, or reception, and we will share that with you. The recording will be on our website and our YouTube page. Bruce, if you're happy, I can also share your slides with them.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Candice. Much appreciated.
Okay, perfect. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we will see you at our next webinar. Bruce, again, thank you so much.
Okay. Have a good day. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.